So pentatonic scales are totally essential for playing blues, but if you feel like your pentatonic scales are sounding boring and lame, I want to show you this one simple rhythmic idea that can change all that. And it's just an idea. You don't need really any more chops. You don't need to learn any more scales. You just need to think about what you're doing a little differently, and it can make everything open up and start to sound a lot more interesting and fun. So I've talked a lot in recent lessons here. Well, I've talked a lot in general, but I've mentioned several times here on the channel how important I think phrasing is, so that you're not just playing scales, but you're actually thinking in terms of the phrasing and the direction of the notes that you're playing. And I'll put a link to a couple of those videos down below. But in this lesson, I want to zero in on the idea of different rhythms. So you can play eighth notes. That's kind of the basic default. One and two and three and four but if you start to think about the different kinds of rhythms you can play, you can start to use that as a contrasting element and play things that sound a lot more interesting by mixing up your rhythm. So in this case, I want to talk about using triplets. So the basic eighth note pulse sounds like that. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now that rhythm, which is either called a swing eighth note or a shuffle rhythm, is really based on a triplet idea. And triplets sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So when you're playing a swing eighth note or a shuffle feel, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, you're really playing the first and third note of a triplet. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that shuffle feel is so foundational to blues. We don't even think about the fact that it's based on a triplet, but it is. So if we want to mix things up and go from playing eighth notes to triplets, we just need to include that middle note. And that's a really good way to just start practicing. So not even worrying about licks, but just get that steady bass going on all 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then grab an E note. You can even use the high string because it's open. You don't have to even do anything over here, right? Just. And you can start with the eighth notes and go to the triplets or vice versa. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and or do the triplets first. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and right? And so now we can switch back and forth. So you want to practice those rhythms in isolation, not even worrying about licks, but just looking at how the fingers line up over the thumb. And then when you go to play licks, you've got this wider rhythmic vocabulary. So if we start off with some eighth note licks, now those are short phrases that lead into the downbeat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Right? We can play a couple of those phrases and then we can answer them with some triplets. Right? And that's not all triplets, but it's mostly triplets. Those are eighth notes and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Right? So and that's the whole idea. It's a little call and response statement. You got these two short eighth note phrases, and then you answer it with this longer eighth note idea. And so you can pour any kind of ideas into that little rhythmic template, and it'll always sound good and always have some kind of musical direction and some sense of contrast in call and response. So always with that same idea, but all different kinds of things that you can do with that specific setup. So this contrast between eighth notes and triplet eighths is, like the pentatonic scale, really foundational to the blues. But it's funny how you can, sort of play with something and be vaguely aware of it, but not get really zeroed in on it until you're really working on it. And in my case, I'm teaching Catfish Blues this month in my membership, the Fingerstyle 5. And so I wanted to make sure I had a really accurate version of the melody because we're doing an instrumental version of the tune. And so I ended up choosing basically the groove from, I think, either the John Lee Hooker or the Lightnin' Hopkins version. I think Lightnin' Hopkins because he plays with more of a shuffle feel. But the B.B. King version, B.B. King's melody is sort of more shaped and more consistent. So I ended up basically transcribing B.B. King's vocal melody to try to figure out what was going on. And in doing so, discovered how essential this back and forth between the eighths and the triplets is. Because the way that B.B. King sings the melody, it's kind of like this. And so even though he's singing it over more of a straight eighths kind of feel, that's the way his melody flows, and that's what some of the phrasing is like. And so you can hear in that mix of triplet and eighth note feel, which is really important. And I hadn't really realized until I went and tried to figure out this particular melody, just how important that mix is to getting kind of a lyrical vocal sound to your playing. So this exercise I've just given you of doing the call and response between the eighths and the triplets hopefully will help you really dial in that distinction between the eighths and the triplets, so that instead of just doing it intuitively, you really have control over that and can put those notes where you want to in your improvising. And that should hopefully help really spark some ideas and open up what you're doing, even when you're sticking to pentatonic scales in the open position. So that's the idea. Now, if you're interested in building your repertoire with tunes like Catfish Blues and other kinds of traditional and contemporary blues material, if you are interested in learning how to improvise, even if you've never improvised before, if you're looking for a more organized, ongoing way to practice and get better without just kind of flailing around, going for random lessons on the internet, I encourage you to check out my membership, like I've mentioned, the Fingerstyle 5, and you can learn more about that at the link below or the link on screen. If you've got a question about today's lesson, I would love to hear from you. Please leave your question or comment down below. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.